Imagine standing on the deck of a ship. Waves crash against the hull, the smell of salt fills the air, and the sea roars beneath your feet. Behind you, a queen commands her warriors, not a king, not a general, but a queen, giving orders with steady confidence as the tide of history turns before her. For centuries, we've been told the seas belong to men. That leadership, strategy, and battle were the domain of kings, admirals, and emperors. But hidden beneath the waves are stories of women who defied those rules. Queens who led fleets, defended kingdoms, and changed the course of empires. In America, we often celebrate our heroes on land: Washington crossing the Delaware, Lincoln guiding a nation through Civil War, Eisenhower leading the Allies on D-Day. But what if I told you that long before the US even existed, the seas had their own warrior queens? Women whose courage rivaled the greatest generals, and whose untold stories still echo into today. In this video, we uncover the warrior queens of the ancient seas, and why their legacy matters to the United States. When we think about America's history, the images that usually come to mind are familiar. Founding fathers signing the Declaration of Independence, presidents shaping a young democracy, generals fighting for survival on the battlefield. But the spirit of leadership, courage, and defiance isn't unique to men, or even to America itself. Across the oceans, centuries before the United States was even a dream, women took to the seas. They ruled coastal kingdoms, commanded navies, and stood against empires. Their stories reveal a combination of power and resilience, qualities that Americans value deeply today. Take, for example, Artemisia of Caria. She rose as a naval commander during the Persian Wars. Or Queen Teuta of Illyria, who faced down the might of Rome itself. These were women who rejected the idea that strategy and war belonged only to men. They proved that true leadership comes not from titles, but from courage, intelligence, and the willingness to risk everything for their people. And here's why this matters for us today. America has always faced the challenge of defending freedom against overwhelming odds. From the revolution against the British Empire, to standing firm in 2 world wars, the nation's story is defined by resistance and bold leadership. These queens may not have sailed under the American flag, but their defiance against empires, their bravery in crisis, and their determination to chart their own course mirror the very struggles that shaped the United States. By exploring their lives, we're not just retelling ancient history. We're uncovering echoes of America's own journey, and lessons that still speak to us in the modern world. Let's begin with Queen Artemisia of Caria, who ruled during the 5th century BCE. Born into a dynasty in what is now modern-day Turkey, she inherited the throne after her husband's death. Many rulers in her position might have retreated into the shadows. But not Artemisia. She embraced her role as leader. And when Persia went to war with Greece, she didn't stay behind, she commanded her own fleet. Picture it, one of the most famous naval battles in history, the Battle of Salamis. Among the great Persian navy, there sailed a woman, Artemisia, commanding ships against the Greeks. Despite being on the losing side, her intelligence and cunning stood out so much that even her enemies, the Greeks, couldn't help but praise her. Remember, this was a society that rarely respected women in power. For them to recognize her brilliance says everything about how extraordinary she was. Now, let's shift to another queen, Teuta of Illyria, ruling in the 3rd century BCE. Like Artemisia, she came to power after her husband's death, inheriting leadership of a coastal kingdom along the Adriatic Sea. Teuta was young, widowed, and underestimated. But she was anything but weak. Instead of playing defense, she turned her fleet into a power strong enough to rival Rome. Rome accused her of piracy. But let's be honest, what Rome called piracy was often just resistance to Roman control. Teuta wasn't simply raiding ships for fun. She was defending her seas, asserting independence, and challenging one of history's greatest empires. Of course, Rome was Rome. They didn't tolerate defiance for long. Eventually, they sent their legions, and Teuta was forced to surrender. But her defiance carried a message loud and clear. Women rulers could, and did, challenge the world's most powerful states. And these 2 women weren't exceptions. History is filled with women who managed diplomacy, led fleets, and defended nations. Their lives weren't fairy tales. They involved bloodshed, betrayal, and impossible choices. But they proved one thing: leadership isn't about gender. It's about grit, vision, and the courage to act when everyone else hesitates. For Americans today, their stories serve as a reminder that leadership doesn't always come from the usual places. Just as America's founding fathers were once underestimated colonists, these queens were underestimated women. And yet, both reshaped history in ways no one expected. So let's talk honestly about what made them remarkable, and where they fell short. Artemisia's greatest strength was her strategic mind. She wasn't afraid to give Xerxes, the mighty Persian king, sharp advice, sometimes even against his own judgment. The courage to speak truth to power, especially as a woman in her time, was extraordinary. Teuta's strength was her fearlessness. She looked Rome in the eye and refused to bow. That kind of defiance resonates even today, because it's the same spirit America admires in its own heroes. Together, both queens embodied courage, adaptability, and boldness, qualities we celebrate in U.S. military and political leaders throughout history. But there were flaws too. Artemisia, despite her brilliance, fought for the losing side. History tends to remember victories, not noble defeats. And her close alliance with Persia sometimes overshadows her accomplishments. Teuta, for all her bravery, was accused of leaning too heavily on piracy and raiding. Even if Rome exaggerated these claims, they painted her as reckless. And when you go against Rome's narrative, you don't get to write your own. In the end, both queens lost ground to larger empires. Their stories inspire us, but they also remind us of the limits of power when facing overwhelming force. And that mix of strengths and flaws makes them real, not polished legends, but human leaders who faced impossible odds. That honesty is exactly why their stories still resonate today. So, where do these warrior queens stand in history, and why should US audiences care? Artemisia and Teuta were more than rulers. They were symbols of defiance. They remind us that leadership isn't about titles or crowns, it's about action. And in that sense, their legacy fits right alongside America's own story. The revolutionaries who defied Britain, the soldiers who stood against fascism, like these queens, they all faced empires that seemed unbeatable. Their legacies also force us to rethink history itself. Too often, women's stories are erased or pushed aside. But when we bring them forward, we see a richer, truer picture of leadership, one that includes not just triumphs, but sacrifices, risks, and the courage to fight on even in the face of defeat. For modern Americans, their stories highlight three key lessons. First, courage can come from the most unlikely places. We shouldn't underestimate voices outside the traditional halls of power. Second, defiance comes with a cost. Standing against overwhelming odds can inspire generations, but it also demands sacrifice. And third, legacy isn't just about winning, it's about inspiring the future. Artemisia and Teuta may have lost to larger empires, but their bravery still echoes today. In the end, the seas may have swallowed their kingdoms, but their spirit lives on. You can find it in every story of resistance, in every fight for freedom, in every leader who dares to challenge the impossible. If you found their stories as inspiring as I did, make sure to like this video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more untold stories of history's hidden heroes. Until next time, keep questioning, keep exploring, and keep the spirit of courage alive.